I want to bring into our coverage Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut, a member of the Intelligence Committee. I just want to recap the news for any of our viewers just joining us. The House has approved a contempt resolution for Steve Bannon. 9 Republicans voted with all of the Democrats. I'm going to read them real quick. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Congressman Meyer, Congressman Upton, Kat Go, who had put together the legislation that would have formed a bipartisan commission before Steve Scalise whipped votes to kill it. Congresswoman Mace, Fitzpatrick, Gonzalez, and Jamie Herrera Butler. Your thoughts about the bipartisan vote today to hold Steve Bannon in contempt of Congress?
Well, Nicole, I was glad to see that it was bipartisan, and by the standards of the day, pretty strongly bipartisan, right? In other words, we're used to hearing from Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger what I would say a position of some principle. 9 is actually better than we usually do when the question is about, the future of our constitutional republic, or what today's vote was really about. And look, you and I both know that, issues of executive privilege don't apply today. Steve Bannon was long gone from the White House when he had the conversations that allowed him to predict the events of January 6th. So what was really on the table today was the institutional prerogatives of the United States Congress, whether somebody can just say, sorry, I'm going to ignore your subpoenas. Hillary Clinton didn't do that when the Republicans were interested in talking to her about Benghazi. She showed up and spoke for 9 hours, right? So I had 202 Republicans, members of Congress of this institution, who were quite happy to say, my slavish loyalty to Donald Trump will even allow me to damage this institution in which I serve. That is mind-boggling.
Well, and not even just Donald Trump. As Robert Goss has been reporting, this was about Steve Bannon, at least today. Adam Kinzinger hasn't ruled out a subpoena for Donald Trump, but this was about a accused felon who was pardoned by Donald Trump in the final days, who hosts a podcast, who has no claim to executive privilege.
Well, I'll respectfully disagree. This isn't actually about Steve Bannon, right? I don't know that my Republican colleagues here have any particular loyalty to Steve Bannon, but I promise you that the 9 Republican yes votes today are just waiting for the comment from the former president in Mar-a-Lago. Steve Bannon is obviously a proxy for Donald Trump, but it does show how completely the Republican Party has become the party of Donald Trump, because only 9 Republicans were willing to risk the wrath of Donald Trump indirectly because they would stand up to Steve Bannon.
Let me go through with you, Congressman, what happens next. The House Speaker certifies the vote that just took place in writing, and then that's delivered to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington by courier, as I understand. Do I have that right?
I think that's right. And then, of course, the Department of Justice will need to make a decision as to whether they follow up on the criminal referral. And again, at this point, it should cease to be a political process. I know that that's a foreign concept, considering what we saw for the last 4 years. The DOJ should make an unpolitical decision about whether they are going to prosecute Steve Bannon for what is a federal crime, that is, standing in contempt of Congress.
Let me show you something that your colleague, Congressman Adam Schiff, said about that being about more than just whether or not Steve Bannon is prosecuted, but about whether or not there are any guardrails left on our democracy.
If we fail to uphold Congress's power to compel information, then we cease to be a co-equal branch of government, unable to perform our oversight or check any abuses of executive power. Take away a court's power to subpoena witnesses, and it fails to be a court. Take away the Congress's ability to do the same, and it fails to be a Congress, becoming instead a mere plaything for a corrupt executive. Do not believe for one moment that if we fail to hold Steve Bannon accountable, that he will be the exception. He will become the rule, not a rule of law, but the misrule of men. Either we are all equal before the law, or none of us is. This is the essence of our democracy.
Congressman Schiff making clear the stakes for the Department of Justice as well. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do. And I can sort of boil that down a little bit, and I can say that sometime the Republicans will be a majority in the House. I hope it's later rather than sooner, but sometime they will be a majority. And when that moment arrives, they are going to want to be able to hold the executive, and do oversight. And 202 of them voted today to do away with that congressional oversight tool. So what are they going to say? Let's just imagine 5 years from now when they want to subpoena somebody in a Democratic administration to come up with a total hypothetical, and that Democratic administration says, I'm sorry, 5 years ago you said that Steve Bannon didn't have to show up, so clearly you don't really care about congressional prerogatives. If that is the message of what happens, and it sadly was the message during the Trump administration when any number of witnesses refused to appear before Congress, you have given up a system of checks and balances. And Americans really need to ask themselves whether they want their elected representatives to give up the 240-year-old system of checks and balances in this country.
Well, I mean, the Republicans have already taken that position, and I wonder if you think this is a moment for Congress to sort of reassert all those authorities, and if you think inherent contempt is something that should be under consideration. If you could explain it and then tell me if you think that's a good idea.
I do. So inherent contempt, of course, is exactly what happened today. But instead of going to the Department of Justice to make a decision as to whether or not to prosecute, Congress does and has in the past asserted its own power. So Congress in the past, this is an authority that hasn't been used in decades, has actually sent officers of the Congress out to arrest people who are in contempt of the Congress. That's called the power of inherent contempt. It's a little awkward, even though there's long precedent for it, because we're not really in the law enforcement business here. We don't really have a jail. But at a moment in time when, and this was certainly the truth under the Trump administration, where the Department of Justice has become a political arm of the president, in this case, President Trump, you have to think about those things if you are serious about a system of checks and balances. And I would hope that most people would be pretty serious about checks and balances.
Yeah, I mean, look, I want to pull out what you're saying. I mean, this is not just a vote about Steve Bannon. Obviously, he's a proxy for Donald Trump, but it's also Republicans going on the record with their true views about how disposable Congress really is. 202 Republicans don't think that Congress is a thing on the same level as Donald Trump in exile at Mar-a-Lago. And I wonder if you can answer a question that I ask just about everyone. Can a single party protect this country from a radicalized party sort of high on disinformation, disdainful of their own institutions' authority and prerogatives?
Yeah, that's the question of the age, Nicole. And, the good news is we had 9 members of the Republican caucus do the right thing today, to do the principled thing. When we saw the last impeachment of Donald Trump, we had a number of Republican senators, many of whom are suffering the attacks of Donald Trump because of that, stand up and do the right thing. But no, it's not at all clear that one party abiding by the norms and the rules, and I got to tell you, this is really hard for me to say because I'm kind of a norms and rules guy. I'm sort of a traditions guy. But when you have a president who is willing to violate every norm and every tradition and to continue to do so after his presidency is over, you really have to scratch your head and say, wait a minute, does that mean we need to do things that we had never contemplated as real? I mean, it's everything from the minting of a coin to stop a default by the United States. I mean, I used to think that was an absurd idea until I saw that every one of my Republican colleagues here were happy to let the country default. So yeah, in extraordinary times, even sort of norm-oriented people like me need to think about whether we're going to, contemplate coloring a little bit outside of the lines of tradition.
It is a pattern. I think it's fair to describe Senator Angus King as norm-oriented as well. And this week he said he views the filibuster differently for many of the same reasons you're using to talk about the situation with Bannon and the possibility of inherent contempt. Thank you, Congressman, for spending some time with us today. It's great to have your thoughts and your reaction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicole.